Hi you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's case is a case that one of you actually requested, and I was so excited when I saw you request it because it is a case that I have known about for a while and it is absolutely terrifying, to say the very least. I'm just going to say right now that I don't really have a solid opinion on this case. It really is just a mystery. I will kind of lay out what I think might have happened, but again, this case is just way too bizarre for me to even come up with the theory that I can fully get behind. So today we are going to be talking about the bizarre death of Cindy James. Cindy James was found dead in the yard of an abandoned house in Richmond, British Columbia at just 44 years old. Her death would go on to be one of the most controversial deaths in British Columbia's history. Prior to her death, Cindy was harassed and attacked for 6.5 years and reported 100 incidents about this harassment to the police, and people are still talking about her death to this day. What exactly happened to Cindy James? When everything began to happen, Cindy James was still living under her birth name, which was Cindy Hack, and she was just 38 years old. Shortly before Cindy's life began to change, she had separated from her husband, Roy Makepeace, who was a psychiatrist. The couple married when Cindy was just 22 years old and Roy was 40, so quite an age difference there, but by all accounts, Cindy was content and at peace with the separation, and the two remained amicable and on good terms. Just 4 months after their separation, in October of 1982, Cindy began to get harassed. It started off with multiple odd phone calls from an unknown male. Sometimes these phone calls were hang-ups, sometimes they were just silent phone calls, and at other times all she could hear was whispers. At night, she began to hear prowlers outside, and on multiple occasions she found out that her porch lights were smashed and her phone lines were cut. At one point, a rock was thrown through her window, and at one point, somebody actually went into her home and slashed a pillow. So as you can tell by this point, these events were escalating and becoming more threatening. Cindy began finding very scary and threatening notes on her property. One of them said, "Soon, Cindy." Another one said, "I see you." Oftentimes these notes were accompanied by very graphic and terrifying photos. Most of these notes were cut and paste notes, which is basically where you cut out letters or words and then paste them to form a note. After a short amount of time, Cindy began to tell people that she felt that whoever was doing this wasn't actually trying to kill her, but was actually trying to scare her to death. Throughout all of this, the police were involved and they were trying to help Cindy and find out who was harassing her. These threatening messages soon turned into acts of violence, and on January 27, 1983, Cindy's friend Agnes Woodcock arrived at her home to spend time with Cindy. However, when she arrived, Cindy did not answer the door. She thought this was a little bit odd, so she began to look around a bit and ended up finding Cindy on the ground outside of her home. Cindy was found with a nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck, and when Agnes asked her what had happened, Cindy had said that she had gone to the garage to grab a box and that she was attacked by somebody. When Agnes asked her if Cindy got a good look at the person who did this to her, Cindy said that she did not and that all she could see was white sneakers. After this incident, the police became more involved. However, the police began to get somewhat frustrated with Cindy because they always felt that she was being evasive and wasn't telling them the full story. Even her parents, Ollie and Tilly Hack, believed that Cindy was being evasive, and they felt that Cindy was withholding information because she had been threatened. They had good reason to believe this because Cindy actually confided in her mother and told her that she had been attacked at knife point and was told that if she said anything that her mother and sister would be next. Was that why Cindy was being evasive with the police? Was she withholding information because she was afraid that something might happen to her family? Over the next few years, Cindy's torment continued, and she wasn't the only target. Whoever was doing this also went after her dog Heidi at one point. Her dog was found alive but was found extremely frightened with a cord wrapped tightly around her neck. Over the course of 1 month, Cindy found 3 dead cats in her garden. 2 of those cats had been strangled and 1 had been hit with a car. All of the cats came with a threatening note, one of which said, "You're next." Soon after, Cindy hired a private investigator named Ozzy Caban to not only protect her but to also find out who was harassing her. Since Cindy's phone lines were often cut, Caban gave her a 2-way radio so that she could immediately contact him in case of emergencies. On January 30th, 1984, Caban heard odd noises coming from Cindy over the two-way radio. He couldn't get a hold of her and was immediately concerned and went to her house to see if she was okay. When he got to Cindy's home, he found that the front door was locked. However, he could look inside and he saw that there was blood on her kitchen floor. He immediately kicked the door down and found Cindy unconscious in the hallway, and she had been stabbed through the hand with a paring knife. And she wasn't just stabbed. A threatening note had been pinned to her hand with the knife, and it said, "Now you must die." After Cindy was taken to the hospital for medical attention, she said that before she was attacked, she saw a man enter the front gate of her home before suddenly being knocked unconscious. She didn't know what it was. She knew it was a hard object, and she believed it could have been a piece of wood that hit her. She also said she remembered being held down by somebody and that someone had stuck a needle in her arm. When police investigated the scene, they didn't find any sign of forced entry, and Caban said that when he arrived, he did not see anyone on the property or in the home. Based on Cindy's account of the attack, it made it seem like there were multiple people involved. However, police began to get somewhat suspicious due to the crime scene, and again due to their feeling that Cindy was being evasive and again not fully telling them the entire story. Police began to conduct surveillance on Cindy's home for days and even weeks at a time. However, when they were conducting their surveillance, nothing would really happen. After they would leave, the attacks would start up again. Of course, it's possible that the person attacking Cindy could have seen them at the house and was smart enough to wait for them to leave. It's possible that the police might not have been super discreet when they conducted their surveillance, which allowed the attacker to know when they came and went. Due to the police's suspicion, Cindy took 3 lie detector tests. For the first 2, the results came out inconclusive. On the 3rd test, which was after the attack where she was stabbed in the hand, the results said that she was being truthful. Eventually, Cindy had a nervous breakdown and was committed to a psychiatric ward, but was eventually released. On December 11th, 1985, Cindy went missing and was soon found dazed and semi-conscious in a ditch about 6 miles away from her home. She again had a nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck. She was wearing a man's work glove and boot. She was covered in cuts and bruises all over her body, and she nearly died from hypothermia. Again, Cindy had no recollection of what had happened to her, and she had no idea how she ended up in the ditch. After this incident, Cindy moved to a new home, changed her last name to James, and painted her car a different color in the hope that she would be able to start fresh and escape her attacker. However, the torment continued. Her friend Agnes Woodcock and her husband Tom would often stay with Cindy to make sure that she was safe, and in April of 1986, during one of their stays, Cindy woke up in the middle of the night and heard noises coming from downstairs. She immediately woke up Tom and Agnes and said that she had heard something. They would soon find out that a fire had actually been started in the basement of the home. The police and the fire department were called and notified. However, once they got to the scene, the police began to get a little bit suspicious again. Again, there were no signs of forced entry, and all evidence pointed to the fire being started from within the home. Another thing that the police found incredibly suspicious was that particular night, Cindy was out walking her dog all alone at 3 a.m. in the morning. If she was afraid that somebody was out to get her, why would she be comfortable walking out all by herself in the middle of the night? At this point, she had been harassed and attacked for about 3 years. However, on the other hand, the fire incident also provided a possible new lead. Since Cindy's phone lines were cut, Tom had to run out to try and get help after the fire was started, and when he ran out, he saw a man standing on the curb staring at the house. He asked the man to go call for help, and instead of saying anything or even acknowledging Tom, the man just ran off into the night. This man was never seen again. Who was that man, and why was he standing on the curb in the middle of the night? After this incident, Cindy was so traumatized that she actually stopped eating and began to starve herself. Due to this, she was committed again to a psychiatric ward and stayed there for about 10 weeks. At this point, they began to examine if Cindy had possibly done all of the attacks to herself and if she was making the whole thing up. They wondered if she had multiple personality disorder or some other form of mental illness. However, her psychotherapist did not believe that she had multiple personality disorder and believed that Cindy was genuinely terrified of what was happening to her. Cindy began to realize that people were not believing her story, and it took a toll on her mental health. While she was in the hospital, she wrote that she felt that suicide was her best option in this situation. However, when she was released, Cindy did not follow up on her plan. Around this time, Cindy felt like she knew who was behind the attacks and told her family that she was going to take care of it herself. Around this time, she began to accuse her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, of being her attacker. The police told her to call him and confront him with the accusations while they taped it. She did do this and they did have a conversation, but Roy denied having any involvement with her attacks or the harassment. Soon after this conversation, Roy received a chilling voicemail of his own. It said, "Cindy, dead meat, soon." I'm going to insert it now into the video, but for better quality, I'm going to link it down below so you can go to the actual video. When police listened to the message, they felt that it was Cindy disguising her voice. On October 26, 1988, just 2 weeks after Roy received that chilling voicemail, Cindy was the victim of another violent attack. She was found unconscious in her car, hogtied with her hands and feet bound behind her back. She was nude from the waist down and again had a nylon stocking wrapped tightly around her neck. Again, when she was asked what happened, she said that she could not remember how she got there or what exactly happened to her. Throughout all of this, Cindy was working with children with emotional and behavioral issues. She absolutely loved being around children and helping them. However, she never had any children of her own. Due to the harassment, her job felt that it would be better if Cindy wasn't around the children, and Cindy soon got a job as a nurse. On May 25th, 1989, Cindy disappeared after going to the local shopping mall to deposit a paycheck. Her car was found abandoned in the parking lot, and on the driver's side door there was some smeared blood. In the car were groceries and a wrapped gift. Underneath the car were items from Cindy's wallet that were scattered all along the ground. She was missing for 2 weeks until June 8th, when a construction crew found her body in the yard of an abandoned house about a mile away from the mall. Cindy was found hogtied with her arms and hands tied behind her back and a nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck. The autopsy report revealed that Cindy's cause of death was a morphine overdose. She also had another drug in her system called flurazepam, which is a powerful benzodiazepine that is usually used to treat insomnia. According to the report, Cindy had taken 10 times the lethal amount of both of these drugs. After looking at the autopsy report and believing that Cindy was behind the attacks for quite some time, the police quickly ruled her death as a suicide. However, her family did not believe that Cindy killed herself, and they believed that she was murdered. Due to this, a coroner's inquest was held to try and determine whether Cindy's death was a suicide or a homicide. This took over 3 months, and over 80 witnesses were called to testify. 3 different psychiatrists were called in, with one of them being her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace. All 3 of the psychiatrists came to different conclusions about what mental illness Cindy was suffering from. Her ex-husband, Roy, believed that she was suffering from multiple personality disorder. The second psychiatrist said that she was suffering from hysterical personality disorder. And the third psychiatrist believed that she was suffering from borderline personality disorder with features of PTSD. Due to the decomposition of Cindy's body when she was found, they were unable to determine whether the drugs that were found in her system were ingested or injected, which would answer a lot of questions about her death. However, they were able to catch a bit of a break because flurazepam can only be taken orally, and a toxicologist believed that Cindy had taken around 80 tablets before her death. Morphine, on the other hand, can be injected. There did appear to be a needle mark on Cindy's arm, but no syringe was found at the scene. All that was really found was Cindy's body. Since they could not figure out how the morphine entered Cindy's body, they were unable to determine a cause of death and said that Cindy James died due to an unknown event. So when it comes to this case, there really only are 2 theories. Either Cindy was attacked by somebody who wanted to scare her to death and eventually ended up killing her, or that Cindy was suffering from some sort of mental illness and committed suicide or had an accidental overdose. To me, this is so bizarre that it's really hard for my mind to comprehend both of the scenarios. We only know about some of the events out of the 100 or so that Cindy reported to the police, but let's give it a go. If Cindy was being attacked by somebody, who could it be? That's kind of the biggest question in this scenario, right? And there were only a few suspects in this case, and only 2 were seriously looked at by the police. The first suspect, as you might guess, is her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, who happened to be a psychiatrist. However, why would Roy want to do this to Cindy? By all accounts, their separation was amicable and they remained on good terms. They divorced without incident and they remained friends. So it's very weird that all of a sudden he would want to do this to her. Obviously, their relationship changed a little bit after Cindy began to accuse him of being her attacker, but up until that point, they were on good terms. They were never able to link Roy to anything, and they even noted that Roy was out of the country during one of Cindy's more violent attacks. However, when she was stabbed through the hand, Cindy made it seem like there was multiple people involved. So could Roy have had somebody maybe helping him? Now this is kind of where the more bizarre stuff comes in. This has not been verified, but it was presented by her sister Melanie on a forum that was discussing Cindy's case. Apparently, Melanie received an email from someone who claimed that Roy and Cindy had gone on a vacation shortly before their separations to the Gulf Islands to visit one of Roy's friends, a doctor, Dr. James Tyhurst. The person who sent this email said that Cindy told someone that she had seen her husband and this other doctor dispose of bodies on the trip. Now, this is in no way verified, and it's unknown whether Roy and Dr. Tyhurst even knew one another. However, I will say that Dr. Tyhurst eventually was charged with sexually abusing his patients. He landed in prison and appealed his conviction and was eventually released. However, he ended up being in civil court and ended up having to pay over $500,000 in damages to one of his victims. So could there be something to that email? Did Cindy maybe see something she wasn't supposed to see? Did Roy and Dr. Tyhurst, who were accomplished psychiatrists, drive Cindy insane in some way? Were they behind the attacks? A lot of people point to Cindy possibly being gaslighted. If you're unfamiliar with that term, gaslighting is a form of manipulation that seeks to sow seeds of doubt in a targeted individual, hoping to make them question their own memory, perception, and sanity. When someone is gaslighting an individual, they will often use persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying to delegitimize the target's belief. Could Cindy have been the victim of gaslighting at the hands of her psychiatrist husband? Again, police have completely ruled Roy out as a suspect, and I'm not saying he's responsible in any way. However, if Cindy was being attacked, it's definitely a possibility that gaslighting was involved. The second suspect was actually a police officer that worked on Cindy's case. In 1982, Pat McBride started working the case and became romantically involved with Cindy. He actually moved in with her, and the relationship ended after he asked her to marry him and she declined. McBride is one of the only police officers that supported Cindy and believed her. At one point, McBride did monitor one of the strange phone calls that Cindy received. In that phone call, the caller did not say anything. If McBride was somehow involved, it would explain why there was no attacks while the police were conducting surveillance. Obviously, he was on the case, so he would know when they were conducting surveillance and when they were not, so it would make sense that there would be no attacks. He would also know Cindy's routine and schedule and the general layout of the home. I'm assuming that since he moved in, he would have a key, so maybe that is why there was never any sign of forced entry. However, the police were able to rule him out as a suspect. I will note that several years later, he was charged with sexually assaulting 2 different women. Apparently, he told one of the women that they reminded him of Cindy James, which is odd, just like the rest of this case. The third suspect isn't really talked about, and it's the man that was standing on the curb after the fire incident. I don't believe the police really followed up with that because they felt that Cindy had started the fire herself. However, why was this man just randomly standing on the curb by her house in the middle of the night? It just seems very odd. Why was he there? Of course, it could have just been for an innocent reason. Maybe he was just walking through the neighborhood late at night. But what if it wasn't innocent? Could he have been the one that was actually tormenting Cindy? There were incidents where Cindy was with people when she would receive the mysterious phone calls. In addition to the one that I mentioned before with McBride, her sister Melanie and her private investigator Ozzy Caban also reported being with her when she received phone calls. In each phone call, the call was short and the caller never said anything. There was another incident when Agnes and Tom Woodcock were over at Cindy's house and they were playing a game of cards when one of her burglar alarms went off. They went down into the basement to investigate and found out that the glass window on her basement door had actually been removed. Obviously, this couldn't have been Cindy that had done it because she was with them playing cards when it happened. And out of the 100 incidents that Cindy reported to police, they were never able to determine that Cindy was staging any of them. Some of these attacks were pretty brutal. A lot of them would have taken a lot of planning, and police were never able to prove that it was a hoax. On the other hand, and out of the 100 incidents that Cindy reported to the police, they were never able to find any proof that there was an actual intruder or attacker that was harming Cindy. Again, every time Cindy would report incidents to the police, they always felt that she wasn't being fully truthful, and she would always tell them that she couldn't remember what had happened. Again, Cindy mentioned that she did feel a needle go into her arm, so maybe the person was injecting her with something that was causing her to have some sort of amnesia or some kind of drug that just altered her memory, so maybe that could explain why she never remembered what happened to her. However, in every incident where Cindy was attacked at home, there was never any sign of forced entry, and there was never any evidence that pointed to anyone other than Cindy actually being there. The biggest incident that sticks out to me was the fire incident for a couple of reasons. First, there was no sign of forced entry. Second, the police determined that the fire was started within the home. And third, Cindy had taken her dog out for a walk that night at 3 a.m. How would an intruder be able to get into the home without any type of entry? Why would they start a fire in the basement? And why would Cindy go on a walk all by herself when she's been attacked and harassed for over 3 years? Why would she feel safe doing that? To me, that does not add up. Was Cindy really in fact staging all of these attacks? Was it all just a hoax? Was she suffering from some sort of mental illness? The police had her take 3 lie detector tests. 2 of them had inconclusive results, and the third said that she was being truthful. During her second stay at the hospital, her psychotherapist also said that he believed that Cindy was genuinely terrified of what was happening to her. However, I think that both of those things are linked. If Cindy really believes in the delusion and is suffering from some sort of mental illness, that delusion would be her reality, so she wouldn't really be lying. That would actually be her truth. So to me, that would explain why she passed the lie detector test. It doesn't mean that necessarily somebody was actually attacking her, but in her mind, she believes it, and if the delusion is that strong enough, it really is that person's reality, so she wouldn't even know that she's lying. During the coroner's inquest, the 3 psychiatrists couldn't really agree on what mental illness Cindy was suffering from. The 3 that were named were multiple personality disorder, hysterical personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder with features of PTSD. Multiple personality disorder, now known as dissociative identity disorder, is extremely controversial in the world of psychiatry, and many professionals disagree on different aspects of the disorder, including on how it is diagnosed and why it develops. Many people that do suffer from this disorder say that they were victims of severe physical or sexual abuse as a child. Did Cindy ever experience that? From what I researched, she did not. Many people also suffer from this disorder after undergoing psychotherapeutic practices. Cindy was married to a psychiatrist. Is it possible that he treated her at some point during their marriage, and that is what led her to develop this disorder? I'm not fully informed about these disorders. You know, they're extremely complex. Even professionals disagree on the disorders themselves, especially dissociative identity disorder, So I don't really know, but the only thing that I do know is that Cindy would have had to have been in a completely different mindset if she was behind all of these attacks. We have to remember that 3 dead cats were found in her garden, 2 of which were strangled. Cindy would have been responsible for this. We also have to remember that her dog was attacked and had a cord tied around its neck. Cindy would have been responsible for this. She would have had to have stabbed herself through the hand. I mean, it would seem to me like she would have to take on a completely different demeanor during these episodes, but if she was suffering from this illness, it would explain why she never really remembered what happened. When it comes to the message that was left on Roy's voicemail, there is no doubt in my mind that that is a woman disguising her voice, and I do believe it is Cindy. However, all of these attacks would have had to have been extremely planned. Again, I'm not sure if she would have been able to plan to that extent if she was in the midst of one of these episodes. Also, from what I gather, it's not common for those with dissociative identity disorder to be able to control if an identity is going to emerge. So if Cindy was suffering from it, wouldn't the police have seen another identity at some point? You know, if she's, has this identity that's capable of doing the things that she would have had to have done to be behind all of these attacks, wouldn't they have seen it at some point? They never did. I don't think you can control when an alternate identity is going to reveal itself. However, I have no idea. So if you have any insight on that, or if you have better facts or know more about the disorder, please leave it down in the comments below, because I just honestly don't know. Some people have theorized that Cindy might have suffered from Munchausen syndrome, which is basically where somebody will fabricate illnesses or create illnesses or injuries to garner sympathy. Is it possible that Cindy suffered from that? When it comes to her actual death, it's really unfortunate that they were unable to determine whether or not the morphine was ingested or injected, because I think if they knew that answer, we would know if Cindy was responsible for her death or not. If Cindy had ingested the pills, experts say she would have had between 15 and 30 minutes before they took effect. If Cindy had ingested the pills, she could have used those 15 to 30 minutes to tie herself up in the way that she was found. An expert said it would have taken her about 3 minutes to do so, and if she was responsible for the other attacks on herself, it would have been easy for her to do since she's already done it before. Again, we know that 80 tablets of flurazepam were ingested before death, and it would be pretty difficult to explain if Cindy didn't ingest them herself. Is it possible that an attacker forced her to take 80 tablets? Yes. Is it likely? I don't think so. If she was injected with morphine, she would have been unconscious almost immediately and unable to tie herself in the way that she was found. There's no way she could have injected it after she'd already been tied, since her hands were bound behind her back. We have to take into account that at the time of her death, Cindy was a nurse and was working at a hospital, so she had access to these strong and powerful medications. Maybe she just started to collect them and use them in her death. You also have to look at where Cindy's body was found. It was found in the yard of an abandoned house about a mile away from where her car was 2 whole weeks after she went missing. This house was kind of known as a party house and was used by teenagers in the area. A party was actually thrown there between the time she went missing and when her body was found. The teenagers said that they did not see Cindy's body whatsoever when they threw that party. There was also a man living in the area in a blue van. He literally lived right by the house, and he said that he never saw Cindy's body either, which is extremely odd. How was Cindy not seen? The location of the house was not only a party house for teenagers, but was also very close to a highly traveled road, and her body was basically out in the open. When Cindy was found, again, she was partially decomposed. An etymologist said that Cindy had likely been at the scene where her body was found for around 6 days due to the state of the decomposition. If that's the case, where was Cindy for the rest of the time that she went missing? Her family and Ozzy Caban said that this is proof that she was actually dumped there and was not killed at that scene. They said that there was no way that she wouldn't have been seen in those 2 weeks. However, just putting in my 2 cents here, if it was staged and Cindy went missing on the 25th, it doesn't mean that whatever happened to her happened that night. She could have laid low for a couple of days and then decided to do what she did near June 2nd. There's also the blood that was found on the car door. I don't believe that the police ever tested to see if that was Cindy's blood. I think they just assumed it was, since she was missing and it was on her car. However, if she did somehow injure herself to stage the scene and put blood there, the cut had to have been small enough for her to control the blood loss, because there was no blood trail leading away from the car. So how did Cindy James die? Was she killed or was it suicide? If I had to lean toward one, I would say that her death was accidental and that the truth lies between both scenarios. What mental illness was Cindy suffering from? I don't know, but to me it's clear that she was suffering from something. I don't know what her motivation was for what she did, and I don't think that we ever will. I think that Cindy could have actually had several incidents of harassment in the beginning, and that it spiraled out of control and she became paranoid. I think with her now living alone for the first time in several years, coupled with the stress of being harassed, might have taken an extreme toll on her mental health or triggered something that was dormant. I think when the police began to question her story, it might have set Cindy off, which led to the attacks becoming more violent. I do think that they were staged. This spanned over 6.5 years, and there was 100 reports, and in none of those were police able to find any evidence of an actual intruder in the home or any evidence of a harasser or an individual that was hurting Cindy. I think when it came to her death, Cindy was at a breaking point. I think the car was staged, and I think she initially just wanted to go missing for whatever reason. I don't think she went to the abandoned house that night. I think once it maybe didn't receive enough attention, or once she wanted to return or be found in a sense, she decided to go to the abandoned house. I don't know if it was accidental or suicide for sure, but I could kind of make arguments for both, I guess. But to me, this explains the etymologist saying she had only been there for 6 days. I think she might have chosen that area because it was a known party house and it was also by a well-traveled road, and thought that she would be discovered in time like she had been with the other incidents. Every attack always seemed to kind of escalate in terms of violence and her risk of death. To me, maybe the envelope was just pushed too far this time. I think a lot about the morphine, and I wonder if she had maybe been taking it all along to help her get through some of the pain from the previous attacks. The one that sticks out to me is obviously her stabbing herself through the hand with a knife. Again, it could have been suicide also because of the sheer amount of drugs that were found in her system. That was a lot of pills. But I honestly don't know. There's evidence that points to it being a homicide. There's evidence that points to it being a suicide. There's evidence that points to it being an accidental death. There's a reason why this case has been debated for so many decades. Regardless of how Cindy died, either way, however it happened, is absolutely terrifying. If she was killed, imagine how terrifying that must have been for that poor woman. I can't even imagine. If it was all in her head, imagine how horrifying that is. Our minds are so powerful, and it is absolutely crazy how much our minds can deceive us. It's hard to believe that Cindy was able to stage all of these attacks while maintaining a job. However, stranger things have happened. Many people believe that someone was helping Cindy throughout this entire thing, and many people believe that her friends could have been behind some of the phone calls. They think that it's entirely possible that Cindy wanted to gain credibility with the police. She knew that they were questioning her story, and she could have been absolutely desperate for them to believe her, and she could have pleaded with her friends, and her friends could have done those phone calls to make it seem like, you know, it was happening and to get the police's attention. A lot of the bizarre events seem to be confirmed by one friend, which was Agnes Woodcock. I don't know if Cindy just didn't have a lot of friends, but I do find it bizarre that a lot of the incidents happened when Agnes was around. This reminded me a lot of the Dorothy Jane Scott case, which is the first case that I covered here on this channel. However, we do know for certain that she was stalked and she was killed by her stalker, and that stalker has never been found. In Dorothy's case, he threatened her for a long time. He would call her, he would do things like leave stuff on her car. But the second that he decided to attack her, he killed her. He didn't plan out any elaborate attacks and just leave her there. So to me, that's always something that I question with Cindy's case as well. Why would Cindy's attacker continually, viciously attack her, but not really do any life-threatening injuries, if that makes any sense? I mean, these attacks were ones of rage. Or at least when I read about the attacks against Cindy, they seemed like they were full of rage. So if this person was full of that much rage and had that much hatred towards Cindy where they were going to harass her for 6.5 years, why would they continually just give her, you know, minor wounds in the grand scheme of things? Obviously, they're very scary, horrifying wounds, but they were never life-threatening. Why would this person just always attack her and then just leave her? I think if there actually was an attacker that was tormenting her, it was a woman. To me, there is no doubt that the voicemail that was left with Roy was from a woman. There's no doubt in my mind that it's a woman trying to disguise her voice. Also, many of the letters that were left for Cindy were cut and paste letters. According to FBI profiler Mary O'Toole, who has consulted on several high-profile cases, most cut and paste letters are created by women. So to me, this again points to Cindy doing it herself or her being harassed and tormented by a woman. I truly wish this case would be reopened and reinvestigated. I think that the police maybe were a little bit too lasered in on just her lying and it being a suicide. I think that happens in cases sometimes. I think that if they did reopen it and reinvestigated it, that there might not be a different, finding, but I do think that other questions would definitely be answered. There is no doubt that Cindy was suffering immensely, whether it was by her own hand or another's. I truly believe that she felt that she was being stalked and tormented. I also do feel that Cindy did it to herself, if I had to choose anything. Like I said, the mind is extremely powerful, and Cindy's case reminded me of the case of Ruth Finley. Ruth Finley was a normal woman living in Wichita, Kansas. She was living a normal life with her husband when all of a sudden she began getting bizarre phone calls. She began getting weird letters from somebody that was calling themselves the poet. These are just a couple of things that happened to her. She was kidnapped and then released. She was attacked in another incident where she was stabbed 3 times, one of which almost fatally punctured her kidney. Urine was found on her porch. Her phone lines had been cut, their Christmas wreath was set on fire, eggs and feces were thrown at her home. This went on for 6.5 years, just like Cindy's torment. And the entire time, it was Ruth Finley that was doing it to herself. This is a woman who stabbed herself 3 times and almost killed herself. Once she finally slipped and was caught by the police, she was able to get the help that she needed. If she didn't get that help, who knows what would have happened. She might have ended up dying. This woman truly believed that somebody was after her and that somebody was attacking her. It wasn't until she was in treatment that she finally realized that she had been doing it herself and why she was doing it, and it stemmed back to very traumatic experiences in her childhood. It is 100% possible to be a complete victim of your own mind and do some pretty awful, terrible things to yourself. When it comes to Cindy's case, there's always going to be questions no matter how you look at it. There's no way to tie up this case in a bow. Again, that's why it's baffled people for decades, and so I think no matter what, we will always be wondering what happened to Cindy James, and it's truly sad. I wish that they would reopen the case and again go over all of the evidence again and try to find out more answers about what happened to her. I don't know really what happened. Again, I put forward kind of what I believed could have happened, but I honestly don't know. I do want to know what your theories are. Do you think that Cindy was being tormented by somebody? Do you think that her tormentor was a woman? Or do you think that Cindy was suffering from some sort of mental illness and staged the attacks and harmed herself? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up for me, and don't forget to subscribe because I will be posting more videos like this in the upcoming weeks. And with that, I'm going to go. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you on my next one. Bye.